a motorman on the Burnaby Lake Central Park and worked on, even on the Chilliwack line. But I'd like to take you back down memory lane with me and watch this Central Park Interurban coming out of the depot, Carroll Street Depot. Now, that must be a Burnaby Lake, pardon me, with the Central Park's going to follow him right out. This film was made 40 years ago, and the commentary is made in 1990, 40 years later, so we're going to have to do a little bit of comparison here. That's the Burnaby Lake, just come over the viaduct on Hastings Street, over the Great Northern Railway tracks. Now he's cutting into the S-curve on Hastings Street. He's comes up to the switch at Clark Drive, which was an electric switch. The motorman had to take it pretty careful around there because the switch threw right in front of the car. And if he was going too fast, he would be headed up the wrong way. He's turning on to Clark Drive now. Now he's heading across Clark Drive towards Venables. Now he's coming up Venables, just about to Commercial Drive, where Little Italy is now. A real sharp curve around that onto Commercial Drive. Now there's a two-car Central Park train with the Burnaby Lake behind him. The Burnaby Lake will stop here at 6th Avenue, and the conductor's got to get out and throw the switch to take the crossover, and the Burnaby Lake line can start on his own right-of-way after leaving Commercial Drive. The conductor's got to go and register in the booths and call out the number of the meet that come in on the opposing train, which he passed somewhere on the city street. That's a little booth there where the conductor goes in to register. You'll notice the Central Park train going down Commercial Drive. A couple of the big Chilliwack cars going to show up here in a second. There they go. Now we're on our way. The Burnaby Lake line is on his own little right-of-way now. He has to shoot back from 6th Avenue to almost 1st Avenue. There's several little street crossings here. One more short block, and we're at Victoria Drive, where the tracks cross and go up the steep grade. That house you see there is still there with a brand new one built right on the right-of-way. Now he's climbing the hill up towards Lakeview. There was no station at Lakeview, just a platform at the top of the hill. That was a real steep grade, and then we used to have a 3-car train go up there in the rush hour every day, and boy, you could walk faster than you could climb the hill. Now we can see the powerhouse at Nanaimo Road there in the distance. This is actually now the alley of 1st Avenue. Now we're veering across in the angle now. Well, he's coming up from Vancouver. They just reversed the scene here. He's coming from Vancouver now up to 1st Avenue, or up to Nanaimo Street at 1st Avenue. Now he veers over and goes down the center of 1st Avenue. If you drive along there today, you'll see there's grass all the way down the middle of the road, and that's where the Interurban line was, right on the top of the grass. That's 1st Avenue the way it was 40 years ago, about 1950, 51. That's Slocan Street Station. It was just a platform there. Oh, he's coming up to Renfrew Street. There's the station ahead at Renfrew. This was all single track here, and half the time the stations were on the wrong side, and the motorman couldn't. He had to guess at where the door was, but they got pretty slick at it after a while. Now he's going down the hill, down towards Windermere Station. Quite a steep hill. You had to really keep a hold of it, or you'd go whistling right by the station. Down the bottom there's a flat spot where the train will sit without any air on it. It's perfectly level for, about a couple 100 feet. And then the next one is Cassiar Station. You can see the barricade on the road. That's as far as the road went. And in the springtime, the caterpillars would get in there, and man, you would go sliding down there right around the curve and have to back all the way up. Because them greasy caterpillars and stink, when they got on cooking on the wheel, hot wheels. We come around the bend here now, and there's Hornpain's substation. A shot coming from Vancouver to Boundary Road, coming into Hornpain Station. Just beyond Hornpain Station is where we have a sighting from he meets the fellow come from Sapperton. It's a one-end sighting. You have to pull in and back out. This is the fellow from Sapperton. He holds the main line. The fellow from Vancouver heads into the sighting. The little tracks on the side are just spur tracks going into the Hornpain substation where we took the transformers in. I worked on a freight engine one day, and we shoved a big, heavy transformer in there. It was so heavy they had to build a spur through Dominion Bridge Company to get the transformer to us. Now we're heading now towards Gilmore Station, just about ready to go across the Lougheed Highway. That's the Lougheed Highway and the wigwag going. In a second, you should be able to see the spur they built through Dominion Bridge. There it is. That's the one they built just to bring that big, heavy transformer in a big, depressed, low-bed flat. Now that's Gilmore Avenue. Goes by Gilmore and takes a big sweeping curve and parallels the Great Northern Main Line right down to Queens Station, which is Willingdon now, Willingdon Avenue. Years and years ago, it was called Queens Avenue. That's why Queens Station was still known as Queens. In the far distance is the old powerhouse, the old substation of Hornpain. That signal is the smashboard signal allowing the Burnaby Lake line to cross over the Great Northern. It's the automatic signals there, so that if there's a Great Northern coming, you have to wait for it until he clears. There, he just went across the Great Northern tracks. Across the flats now, over Still Creek to Murren Station, which was the foot of Royal Oak Avenue. There's the trestle over Still Creek. Murren Station just ahead. That's Murren. Now you'd be right along the side of the 401 freeway right here. This is Douglas Road. Now Douglas Road, the road goes over the top of the freeway. In the rush hour, we used to have two cars from here to Vancouver. They would cut one car off here at Douglas, and the brakeman would stay with it. The conductor and motorman would take the single car to their meet at Hill. And the fellow they met at Hill would couple onto the single car we left at Douglas Road, and they'd continue on to Vancouver with the brakeman. The brakeman and the one car would stay always at Douglas Road to Vancouver. That's Sprott Station. It's one of the interchanges on the 401 freeway is Sprott. Heading now towards Burnaby Lake Station, which was the old Sperling Avenue. Actually, Sperling Avenue is not cut through there anymore. There's a big Burnaby Fire Station there on Sperling, just off of Douglas Road. Here he comes around the bend, heading towards Sperling Avenue and Burnaby Lake Station. Oh, he didn't stop at Burnaby Lake. He said, boy, he's really wound up. He's going to go right around there to Rayside. That's a little trestle. That little creek that he just went over is the creek that drains Deer Lake into Burnaby Lake. There's Rayside. There was a horse farm here. They used to rent riding horses, and they take the trail along the side of the tracks and ride almost around Burnaby Lake. The next station is Vorse. Pretty lonely country out there, but that's right. The freeway is almost on top of the Interurban there now. Just past Vorse. There's the meet down there. You'll see him in the shadows. That's the meet, and he'll go to Vancouver, and that's Hill Station. We're carrying on to Safford. Cumberland Road is the next station. It's just down the foot of Cumberland Road. Where up the hill is the George Darby Hospital. You can't drive down there anymore. But at one time you could drive right down to Cumberland Road Station. And he winds around through the bushes there, around a couple of curves. And we'll get to Stormont Curve here pretty quick. It was quite a little sharp grade, sharp turn, and a fairly good little grade around there. You had to get hold of it coming around there. You'd dump half your passengers. There's Stormont Curve coming up. Just around the curve is Stormont Station. And whistle board on the white sign on the post there with the SX on it. And S is for station, and X is for crossing. You're supposed to blow the whistle when you see that. And we're not far out of Sappert in the end of the line now. We got to go over Caribou Road at Caribou Road Station. You can hardly find the right-of-way through here now. It's all growing up. There's Caribou Road Station. That board with the right-angle sign on it is a stop board. It's facing the motorman now. He has to stop. Because there's a BC Electric bus line comes down there. The Lockdale bus comes down Caribou Road Hill. From Westminster Depot to Boundary and Hastings it went. Now he winds around the side of the hill, which is still pretty well pushed down there, although on the high side of the hill they are clearing out and putting in new homes. One little station here is called the Golf Club, kind of an interesting thing. I didn't know for years why they called it Golf Club. But in about 1910, the members of the Vancouver Golf Club on Austin Road asked the BC Electric to put the station in, and they used to have a horse and wagon would come and pick the golfers up from Golf Club Station and take them up with the horses and wagon up to the Vancouver Golf Club on Austin Road. Later on, a few years later, they had an old McLaughlin Buick that used to haul them. Now we can see the car barns at Saverton, round the bend, and that's the end of the line, which at one time the line went right along Columbia Street in front of the penitentiary, right down Columbia, down through town to the depot at 8th Street and Columbia. But when they put the buses in 1937, this is the end of the line. The conductor will go in that little booth and phone the dispatcher and get clearance to head back to Vancouver. And in a moment, you'll see the motorman get out there, out the back door, and change the trolley pole. There he is. Well, that's the end of the Burnaby Lake, but it looks like we're going to go right on the Central Park line now. Let's see, oh my goodness, we're down here on Columbia Street, right at 8th and Columbia by the old tram depot. That fancy lamp stand is right in front of the CPR depot. That's the Chilliwack baggage car coming over in the morning. He's going to turn right into the depot, into track 3. Now, there's the Central Park pulling out with a pair of St. Louis, pulling out of track 1. That's the Westminster Trust building in the background. Still looks as good today as it did then. He's right out in the middle of Columbia Street, and then he goes down past the front of the market, over 10th Street. In a moment, we'll get a shot of the car barns in New Westminster there. That's where they built a lot of them. Most of these cars were built in New Westminster. Right in those shops. This is a big Coolman car. There was 3 of them bought. You can tell by the round windows. That was a pair of St. Louis there, the square windows. This is all Stewartson Way now. And this is 14th Street Station, right opposite Alaska Pine. SkyTrain guideway is right above this spot. We had a stop at 12th Street Junction, 3rd Avenue, 14th Street, 16th Street, 6th Avenue, Meade, and Elsona. And now the SkyTrain leaves Westminster and goes straight to 22nd Street, which is about Elsona, with no stops. Climbing up the hill. This is right alongside of Stewartson Way. Now we've crossed 6th Avenue or Marine Drive, and we're heading to 20th Street, which was Meade Station. Here's a big pair of Coolmans coming down, heading towards New Westminster. There's Elsona. Now we're going around the bend to Connaught Hill Station. Just beyond Connaught Hill now is used to be the old gravel pit, but now it is where the car barns and repair shops for the SkyTrain are. That's Connaught Hill Station right at 10th Avenue. The old spur you see is where they used to get the gravel gons out of the gravel out of the gravel pit. And that big clear space is now where the SkyTrain car barns are, taking up the whole area. Here's the whistle board for Leaside Station, which was Stride Avenue. There's McGregor, And we go around the bend, and all that bush on the right is where Weiserloch is now. All industry there. The next stop is Printer, which is straight down the hill from Burnaby South High School. Now, there's all the high school kids there all run down the hill to catch this train, but he's going to fool them. He's not going to stop for them. He's going to go right through there. Look at the meanie doing that. The kids don't know it, but he knows that there's another train following right behind him to take care of the school kids. Now he's coming around the bend to Fraser Arms Station. This is at Gilly Avenue, and this is where the buses met the Interurban. That looks like an old pair of thousands. We had 9 of those. Or 10? I guess it was 10. Because they were all in pairs. The next station is where the old original tram line used to go before they built the cutoff in 1912. If you see straight down through the camera, that pole line and the track, that is the old original Westminster Tramway. It is still used for freight for a couple of blocks. Here he's coming up to Highland Park Station, where the old streetcar was on the old original tram line, and the streetcar used to meet the train here before they put the buses on. Look at the big stump on the right-hand side there. Huge big tree they must have fell. Now we're coming up to McPherson Station. On the left-hand side was a big cannery where they used to can fruit, vegetables, and they've just completely torn it all down now, and it's all brand new, nice condominiums. Heading towards Royal Oak Station. Now we're crossing Nelson Avenue towards Jubilee Station. Now, an interesting fact here that right from this station for the next 4 or 5 stations, is all Metro Town. This is where the Jubilee Station is, where Imperial Street crossed the tracks. Now he's leaving Jubilee. Now the next station was Dow Road, which is difficult to find now because of Metrotown. The spur on the right-hand side is the freight spur that used to service the Ford plant, Kelly Douglas. When they put that track in, they had to cut the stations in half. So see how skinny the station is? They had to make room for the track. That's Dow Road Station. Now you can see West Burnaby. It's just a half a block away. There was another stop we had to make. Now that is about right where Metrotown Station is on the SkyTrain today. Then we come down to McKay. And this will be Patterson coming out. Now Metrotown goes practically from, it goes from McKay to Patterson. Now we're going down through Central Park. Kingsway, you can see the traffic on Kingsway ahead there. Have a good shot of one of the old Pacific Stage buses here in a moment. It's big green. I think it's a Brill, but that was a beautiful bus in those days. There he is. Look at that. He's not afraid of that old Interurban. He knows that Interurban's going to stop. That's Central Park Station. Now we're going down pretty good grade here. If we can get through Park Avenue without stopping, we can get this thing really rolling. There's a big Valley car coming up, and the big Chilliwack cars. He goes right by Park Avenue Station. Yeah, this is what we used to call Collingwood East, which is now known as Joyce Station on the SkyTrain. Always got lots of customers from Collingwood East. Notice this is Collingwood West Station, but look at the woodwork on the top of the stations. They were ornamental, no other reason that anybody can figure out. All the stations at one time had those, like a spire on the top. This is one of the old thousands. We only used these in the rush hour. They were not quite as big and not as powerful as the general run. There's the old powerhouse substation at Earls Road. That old building is still there today. It looks like there's split, but it's still there. This is Earls Road Station. There's a portable substation out there just behind the station cover. Right here is where 29th Street Station is on the SkyTrain. Our next stop is Beaconsfield. That's Slocan Street, but the SkyTrain goes underneath Slocan Street now. This is one continuous grade right from Lakeview Station right up to Collingwood West. It's just a perfect grade all the way. No up or down or anything, just perfect grade. Coming into Nanaimo now. Nanaimo Street goes underneath at this point. And it still does on the SkyTrain. Nanaimo Station. So we're just going over there, and it's Gladstone Station. Just down the bottom of the hill is Lakeview Station, right by Trout Lake. It's coming around the corner now to Victoria Drive, which was a very busy street in those days. And there's a stop board for the Interurban. The motorman has to stop and whistle off before he crosses Victoria Drive. And then it's a very short distance to Cedar Cottage Station, where he cuts onto the city street, coming into Cedar Cottage. Now he's coming down Commercial Drive towards 12th Avenue, three-car train with a trailer in the center. You notice there's no trolley poles on the center car. It's no motors in it. There's the old L6, old line car, right out going over the Great Northern Cut on Commercial Drive. He's coming down Venable Street now, going to turn on to Clark right by Hammond Furniture. You notice how slow he's going. That's a pretty tight curve there. He has to be pretty careful coming around there. Now he's on Clark Drive heading for Hastings Street. There's a PCC going around the S curve on Hastings Street. And another pair of, looks like a pair of thousands coming around. Yeah. And one of the old steel streetcars following him. Now there's a pair of St. Louis coming down towards Main Street, Main and Hastings. Real busy transfer, Main and Hastings. The only place on the whole railroad where they could go anywhere in any direction. Now he just crossed Columbia, starting in towards Carroll Street Depot. Yeah, he's crossed over to the opposite Main, heading into Carroll Street Depot. Now, wasn't that a nice ride you went on? Well, I'm going to give the mic over to Brother Vic Sharman here because he's going to do a little commentary. My voice is getting a little hoarse. Here's all yours, Vic.
Well, thank you, Frank. Vic Sharman speaking, and I spent a long career in transit, worked for a little time on the Interurbans, and then became involved in the planning and scheduling of the system for many years. So what we're going to look at now is the Oak Street car line, which was a one-man car operation from downtown Vancouver at Victory Square, which is where we're showing the picture now, going south on Cambie Street and then ending in Marpole. So as we look at this scene, we see the car heading south on Cambie Street coming down to Robson, and there's another Oak Street car coming towards us. This line was equipped with double-end one-man cars, mostly the Brill type cars, which were quite comfortable in the latter days. The cars had been rebuilt and equipped with leather seats and one-man controls, dead-man operation, and so on, and provided a fairly comfortable but somewhat slow ride. This scene is crossing the old Cambie Bridge, which of course has now been replaced by the new Cambie Bridge or Connaught Bridge. And the cars had to go very slow through the center span as the span swung, and of course the trolley overhead had pans at each end of the span, which required slow negotiating in order not to lose the trolley pole. This scene shows us coming off Cambie Bridge or Connaught Bridge and down towards 6th Avenue. And you might get a glimpse of the City Hall just up in the left, although I think we might have lost it. And this is coming south on Cambie to Broadway. Here's the car approaching Broadway, making preparation to make a right turn to go westbound on Broadway, where it shared trackage with the Fairview Beltline. And proceeding west on Broadway, passing Willow Street, I believe, Heather Street, in the vicinity of the Vancouver General Hospital. There's a Fairview Outer Belt car just past us there. And now we're coming up towards Laurel Street, and then very shortly we'll make a left turn onto Oak Street. There's the car approaching Oak Street, turning into Oak, and there's a northbound car just ready to leave Oak to turn east onto Broadway. There's quite a sharp grade between Broadway, which is 9th Avenue, and then 10th Avenue, and we're just crossing 10th Avenue now. To the left was the old King Edward School, which has since been torn down and is now being filled in by buildings of the Vancouver General Hospital. This is the S-turn approaching 16th Avenue. And the line is double track at this point, but will soon go into single track operation. And here we are now on single track, and we're coming into 22nd Avenue, where the first passing track was. Now, this line was not equipped with any sophisticated signaling. In fact, it didn't have any signaling at all. And the single track operation was controlled by what we call staffs, just wooden sticks that had the section inscribed on them where the staff was giving the motorman the right of way to travel in that section. So as the motorman approaches the 22nd Avenue siding here, he has to wait for the northbound car to come. And here's the northbound car coming. You see the motorman, or operators, we call the one-man operators, handing the staff across. So now the southbound operator is in possession of the staff, which gives him the right to travel in that single track section up to the next passing siding further up the hill. This scene shows us crossing 25th Avenue, and you can see there's a siding into 25th Avenue or King Edward Avenue. We're now approaching Shaughnessy Hospital. And there weren't many shelters on this line, but you saw there was a shelter there at the hospital, I guess for the benefit of people visiting the hospital, perhaps. Rather unique for that line. Most of the stops were just in the open, marked by cards or posters on the telephone poles. We're now going up the hill towards 37th Avenue, and to the right now is the Van Dusen Gardens. And of course, at that time, the golf course, Quilchena Golf Course, was in place there. To the left is the high school, and here's a picture now of the car southbound coming up the hill towards 37th Avenue. And again, we have a meet, and you'll note the operators will exchange staffs and gain possession of the correct staff to allow them to proceed on to the next section. This is a very simple system, and yet it was fairly effective. We're now coming south on Oak Street and approaching 41st Avenue, and of course, to the left now is the Oak Ridge Transit Center, and to the right is the Louis Breyer Home and Hospital, but at that time, the Quilchena Golf Course was in place at that point. And it's hard to imagine that this intersection is so busy today. When you look back 40 years ago, it was quite quiet. Now, there's one of the Fagel buses crossing, and of course, those buses were bought in great numbers and became the replacement vehicles for many of the streetcar lines as they were converted from rail to rubber. We're now proceeding south on Oak Street between 41st and 49th Avenue. And to the left, there was a gun club, which has since relocated to Blue Island in Richmond. And this was all very sparsely populated area at the time. Going into another siding, and again, there will be the exchange of the staff from the other car. All the equipment we've noted thus far in this film are the J.G. Brill cars. These were built in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and were renovated, however, in the Kitsilano shops in Vancouver. Now proceeding south on Oak on the downgrade towards Marpole, and this would be in the vicinity of about 54th Avenue. And the gentle curve as we come in towards 57th Avenue. I believe this is 57th Avenue, if I remember correctly. The one-man cars, of course, were marked by the X on the front, the two triangle shapes, which indicated to the public that these cars would be entered by the front door. The two-man cars didn't have such markings, and of course passengers entered by the rear doors. These particular cars had double stream front doors and then a single exit treadle door at the other end. And again, a further meet. This is the last meet point before the terminus at Marpole. As I recall, I think the cars ran on about a 10-minute basic headway. And during rush hours, there would be double heading because they couldn't improve the headways because of the spacing of the passing sidings. So at times in rush hours, there'd be two cars running on the same schedule to provide increased capacity. Now the car has left Oak Street and is now on Marine Drive. And in fact, I believe at this point has come to the actual terminus in Marpole. And that's verified by the fact that the operator has got out and is now putting up the other trolley pole and removing the other pole to change ends. These cars were double enders with controls in each end. And so the car is now leaving on its return trip to Vancouver. Now, the film title showed Fairview Beltline, but actually we're going to have a trip on the observation cars, and we see the observation car sitting at the starting point at Cambie and Hastings alongside the Province Building, and a terminus which was shared with the Oak Street cars. The observation cars were rather unique. They were a sort of a toast rack type design, as you can see in the picture, and were a real feature in Vancouver for many, many years. They not only provided a sightseeing trip, but there was also an entertainment feature to the cars. There were two personality conductors who were well known in the city at the time. One was Teddy Lyons, who was actually a real comedian and kept the passengers entertained with his jokes and comedy. And then the other conductor was Dick Gardner. And Dick was an amateur magician, and he could actually do sleight of hand tricks and really confound the passengers with these various tricks. Now the cars made a big loop and ran south on Granville Street. And here we are crossing the bridge. This is the Cambie Bridge, actually. And operated via Granville, 41st Avenue, Dunbar, and Broadway. Incidentally, there was a very old intercity type bus there. It looked like a Fitzjohn bus crossing Cambie Bridge. Here we are. Here's the observation car heading south on Cambie, followed by one of the new Canadian Car Brill trolley coaches, which, of course, were the vehicles that replaced the majority of the streetcar lines in Vancouver. Also in that last picture was a Pacific Stage Lines twin-coach Fagel bus. And this picture shows the Cambie trolley coach operating, so this was taken after that first trolley coach conversion. We're heading west on Broadway now. And here's a scene taken from the seats. The seats were staggered so that people had a good view, a good forward-facing view. That's Dick Gardner acting as conductor on this particular trip. Dick was not only a magician, he was a musician and a comedian, and both he and Teddy Lyons were ideally suited to this type of service. Now, the car has gone all the way along West Broadway and is now on Dunbar, coming up the Dunbar Hill around 14th Avenue, the Dunbar diversion, and it's going to make a turn onto 16th Avenue, and then we'll go on Dunbar southbound until it reaches 41st Avenue. On these trips, the conductors had arranged with local people to have their children come out and sing songs and do little dances on the street. And the car would stop, the observation car would stop, and while the children would perform. And it was really old-time homespun entertainment, I guess. Not very sophisticated, but it certainly was well regarded in its day. The car is now heading south on Dunbar. and continuing south on Dunbar. The Dunbar lines were served by two-man cars. Now here's some of the entertainment. We have a little girl playing an accordion. The streetcar approaching is one of the, what were called the Hastings East steel cars. These are built by Canadian Car and Foundry in about 1926. The car in the background is one of the Brill streetcars. We're now turning the corner onto 41st Avenue at Dunbar. And then the car is going to Y at this point. Now, the observation car routing was altered during the diminishing years of street railway service, and this was taken later on when the Carrollsdale line was not available for service, but at one time they used to make a big one-way loop. In this case, they've run both ways on Dunbar, so my earlier comment on the routing was the one that was in effect prior to the time these pictures were taken. Now we're again heading north on Dunbar. We've come to 16th Avenue, the diversion, and then again we'll head north on Dunbar down towards Broadway. There were two observation cars, number 123 and 124, and then in the early years they were backed up by another car, number 29, which was really a city streetcar that had the top removed from the window railing upwards. And this car helped out in busy times when 3 cars were needed. However, when the war came along, there was such demand for ridership on the system that number 29 was put into the Kitts line of shops and rebuilt into a conventional streetcar and served until the end of street railway service and regular passenger service. We've now crossed the Granville Bridge, and we're coming up to Pacific and Granville, and making the S turn to go north on Granville, north of Pacific. Of course, this is all radically changed now with the new Granville Bridge, and it's hard to identify these scenes and relate them to the present day situation. This is coming up to Davie and Granville. There's one of the PCC cars coming southbound on the Kitsilano line. There were 36 PCC cars on the Vancouver system. The observation car now is just turning off Granville onto Hastings Street, and in this scene is approaching Victory Square, which is the completion of the run, and the passengers are disembarking here. And then the observation car will run deadhead to Prior Barns and then resume another trip at a later time. Again, a Fagel, twin coach Fagel gas bus is showing up there, and of course is indicating the shape of things to come as the system will gradually be converted. And the Fagel gas buses served as an interim measure when the lines were being stripped of trolley overhead and were put in service until the trolley coach overhead could be put in place. So they served on many of the lines on an interim basis. And so the observation car in this case looks to be heading back onto Cambie Street and ready for another trip. A most interesting part of the Vancouver Street Railway scene. We're now going to have a trip on the Skagit River Railway. And as a matter of fact, in this scene, this is my wife and my sister and my daughter taken as we were about to embark on a trip with Ken Hodgson, who took these films to the Skagit River Railway. Now, this isn't related in any way to the BC Electric system or the Vancouver system. This is in Skagit River, Washington, and was a railway operated by the city of Seattle to serve as a connection to their powerhouse and dam system. The city of Seattle generates power and light on the Skagit River. And so these cars were old interurban cars from the Oregon Electric Railway, which had been demotorized and were serving as trailers and were pulled by electric locomotives. This was a highly scenic line, and it was a popular excursion for a day trip. One could drive to New Halem, and that was the end of the highway. And at that point, you could take passage on the trains and also have a combination dinner trip, which would provide a meal in the mess hall, I guess you'd call it, for the construction workers. And then the train, of course, it would take you from New Halem up what they call the gorge, and the train is now traversing the gorge to the foot of Diablo Dam. And here we are with an electric locomotive pulling three former Oregon Electric passenger cars up the gorge. This area is now covered by the North Cascades Highway, although the highway runs at a much higher elevation than the railway did. And at this point, the train is crossing the Skagit River and going on to the other side. These cars were nicely refurbished and provided a most scenic trip. When we reach the top end at Diablo Dam, we will leave the train and go up the side of the dam on a lift, and then we'll take a trip on Diablo Lake. We're now passing the Gorge Dam on our way up to Diablo. As you can see, we have a very nice warm summer day here, and these cars didn't have screens on the side, the windows open, and one was able to lean out and enjoy the scenery, and of course it was ideal for taking the type of pictures that we have on this film. The line was abandoned probably in the early 1950s, I believe, and then of course the North Cascades Highway was completed, and now one can travel past this point right through into central Washington, through Winthrop and into the Wenatchee area by car. Again, crossing one of the bridges, and beautiful view of the Cascade Mountains, and now coming to the easternmost terminus of the line, and at which point the passengers will disembark. You can see the Diablo powerhouse there, and here's the train coming around the corner into the station. At this point, we'll board a skip which goes up the side of the hill alongside the Diablo Dam. And then we'll transfer to another short segment of the railway, which operated along Diablo Dam, where we will board a boat. Now, this is the skip or the lift, and you can see it's large enough to accommodate railway cars, and it's a counterbalance. You can see the counterbalance just moving under the lift as the lift comes down towards the lower station. Passengers just stood on the lift, as you can see in the picture, and you can see the rails that connect with it so that it's possible to put railway cars onto this lift for the other section. Now, this view is from the lift, of course, looking down towards the passenger train, which we have just left, and shows the steepness of the grade. Now, at the top, there's another electric car waiting for us, and here we are now on this short section running alongside Diablo Dam with Diablo Lake in the background. And at this point, we're going to board that passenger boat, which was shown briefly, and we'll sail on the lake to the foot of Ross Dam. There was no road or rail extension beyond this point, so the only means of getting through to the dam was by the lake, and presumably the construction supplies for Ross Dam were transported via this railway, the lift and the other railway, and transferred onto barges and barged up the lake to provide the materials for Ross Dam. The lake narrows as you approach Ross Dam, an area of great scenic beauty. Of course, one is in the Cascade Mountains, and it's extremely pretty. You can see the lake is narrowing into the gorge, and of course this was all riverbed at one time. And there's a picture of Ross Dam, and as many of you know, Ross Lake extends across the Canadian border, and it's really just below Hope, BC. There's Ross Dam and the Ross Powerhouse. And then the return trip, of course, on the lake back to Diablo, and then the train to New Halem, and then the automobile home. So something that is not available today, but was a very interesting trip that one could take up until the early 1950s. Now, our title reads Observation Car Trip, but in reality, we're going to take a trip on the Fairview Belt Lines. Now, the Fairview Belt Lines, and this picture is taken at Broadway in Maine, and this car has just turned off eastbound Broadway to northbound Maine, and is coming down to 7th and Main. The Belt Lines were very old lines, and operated via Broadway, Maine, Hastings, Granville, Broadway in both directions. And so they were known as the inner and outer belt lines. This scene is on the outer belt line as we're traveling northbound on Main Street down towards First Avenue. They were extremely busy lines, and probably the busiest portion was on the section along Broadway between Main and Granville Street. And of course, in subsequent years, with the revision of the trolley coach, or introduction of the trolley coach lines, the Broadway Crosstown line was introduced, which eliminated the transfers that people were required to make at Main Street and at Granville. So both Main and Granville were very busy points on this line. These sections along Main Street and Hastings were not as busy as the portion along Broadway. We're continuing north on Main Street, just passing what is now the Main Street or Science Center station on SkyTrain, and the VIA terminal would be to our right. And coming up to Prior Street, and of course Prior Street has great significance in that this is where prior car barns were, where many of the Vancouver streetcars were housed, and you can see Prior Barns just to the left there. And the old Cobalt Hotel is just to the left. And now, today, the Greyhound bus lines have a garage and maintenance center on the site of the old prior car barns. We're coming north on Main Street, overtaking a Pacific Exchange Lines intercity bus, and of course the Brill trolley coaches are in evidence. These pictures having been taken during the period when the system was undergoing changeover from streetcars to trolley coaches and buses. A BTC car making an unusual turn at Main and Hastings having probably come from Prior Barnes and going into service on Hastings Street and turning north on Hastings. And as was commented on earlier in the tape by Frank, when he was relating to the Central Park line, the intersection at Main and Hastings was called a Grand Union, and all directions could be made by streetcars and interurbans, the only Grand Union on the system in Vancouver. Main and Hastings was a major point on the system. There were always traffic inspectors at that point regulating the cars, and now we've made a turn onto Hastings coming down towards Columbia. You can see the Carroll Street Interurban Depot and the head offices of the BC Electric Company just to the left. We have a trolley coach crossing in front of us on Columbia Street, and then again coming to the Interurban Depot at Carroll Street. You can see the neon sign Interurban Train Depot just on the left. Now this is looking the other way from the Interurban Depot east on Hastings Street. Proceeding west on Hastings, we're passing Woodwards, so that hasn't changed. Woodwards is still here, and also the cenotaph at Victory Square as we're coming up towards Cambie Street. Note the safety zones in the street. The streetcars had one disadvantage, of course, and the passengers had to come out into the middle of the street to board, and the boarding areas were marked by safety zones so that automobiles would steer around these and keep passengers protected. We see a mixture on this street of PCC cars, some of the one-man steel cars, which were in different route assignments during the latter days of the street railway operation. The PCC cars originally were assigned to the Victoria and the Joyce lines and operated on those as well as the Kitsilano line exclusively. But in the latter days, they were assigned to the Hastings East and the Grandview lines after those earlier routes had been converted. So we're now on Hastings Street at Granville, and now see one of the Fairview cars turning from Hastings to southbound Granville and followed by a Kitsilano PCC car. This now, of course, is a transit mall. The Granville Mall extends from Hastings right through to Nelson Street and is dedicated to transit vehicles only. And so that is just a brief view of the Fairview Beltline.